All right, let's go ahead and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the June 6th meeting of the Shawnee County Board of County Commissioners. I'm Aaron Mays, representing District 3 and currently serving as chairman. On my left is Commissioner Bill Ribbon, representing District 1, and on my right is Commissioner Kevin Cook, representing District 2. Good morning.
Good morning.
First item, please.
Item 1, proclamations presentation. Item A, the WT Group LLC Accessibility Practice Presentation, Parks and Recreation.
Good morning, Tim Laurent, Parks and Recreation Department. This morning, as you know, last year you allocated some funds out of capital outlay for us to do an ADA transition plan. That has been completed. And today I have John McGovern with the WT Group to present his findings, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have afterwards. So with that, John McGovern.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, commissioners, for your time. And what I'll do is just talk a little bit about some of the things that we saw. I'll spend some time talking a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act and why the transition plan is such an important step. And as Tim said, I will look forward to your questions. So our scope of work for the Parks and Recreation Department matches the requirements of the ADA Title II, which addresses both built environments as well as programs and policies. So we conducted access audits of every park and facility. We met with staff to evaluate how requests from people with disabilities who ask for a reasonable modification or support in a program are invited, analyzed, and fulfilled. We held community engagement sessions. I'll talk a little bit more at the very end about that. And then we put together the phased retrofit schedule, which is the transition plan itself. So just a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act. I heard from some of the earlier conversation that you're pretty familiar with it. It's been around since 1992. It became effective in January of '92. And it provides comprehensive civil rights protections in a handful of areas. For you, as far as Parks and Recreation, you're interested in Title II. Title I is all about employment. That certainly wasn't our scope. And Title III is about the hotel I stayed at, the rental car agency I got my rental car from. So it's privately owned places that make themselves available to the public. Telecommunications is a key part of it. Probably some of you have your cell phone on you. So this is a good example of the part of the ADA that's become obsolete, because if I'm a person who's deaf or hard of hearing, I can text Commissioner Cook and we can have a conversation and we move on from there. So that didn't exist readily in 1990 when the ADA was signed into law. So it's a good example of one of the things that has changed. I mentioned Title II, so it does govern county services, parks, and facilities. There's a hard line drawn between new construction. So new construction or design has to fully comply with the federal standards or with Kansas standards, whichever are more stringent for that particular asset. For existing sites, though, it's very different. And we were just kind of having this discussion about the program access test. So if you have a lot of ball fields, you clearly don't have to make all ball fields accessible. It's not enough to make the program of ball fields accessible at only one site. So in our work throughout the recurring assets that the department has, we recommended a minimum of 1 of 3 for recurring assets be made accessible. And then certainly over time, as sites are altered, the number of accessible elements will increase. I mentioned the 2010 standards for accessible design. I'm going to show you some pictures of some of the things that we saw, and in part because the 2010 standards for the first time ever include recreation assets like sports fields and playgrounds. You are going to see some things in parks that are deficits, and that's simply because this is a newer part of the requirement. I do want to talk a second about enforcement. ADA enforcement remains robust, so a person with a disability can file a complaint. The Department of Justice can come and evaluate your sites and enter into a settlement agreement with you. They've found their way to Kansas a number of times. So remarkably, from the time that the first President Bush was the president and the ADA was signed into law to today, the settlement agreements from the Department of Justice look remarkably the same. There's also a requirement that you have a strong internal grievance process. In our recommendations to the Parks and Recreation Department, we're going to suggest that there's no need to make it sound adversarial. You don't need to call it a grievance or a dispute process. So instead, we're going to suggest that you think of it as an access and inclusion solutions process, because that's what Tim and the staff are trying to do. They're trying to find a solution to the particular issue that the person has brought forward to them. A little more about Title II. Programs have to be made available in the most integrated setting. So if I have a son on the autism spectrum and I want him in one of your summer programs alongside kids who don't have disabilities, then he has every right to be in that program. The county also has, through the Parks and Recreation Department, an obligation to provide supports ranging from different staff training to a higher staff ratio to sign language interpreters to a variety of other supports. The third bullet point is a really important one for Parks and Rec agencies around the country, and that's that contractors or concessionaires also have to comply with the ADA while they're on your sites. So it's not unusual for us to see a Parks and Recreation Department contract out golf course management to a private business. That's fine, but the private business then has to meet the Title II requirements. Same for aquatics, we see that from time to time. Lastly, kind of a subtle piece of Title II, processes for people who have a disability can't be made more difficult. In other words, I can't have to jump through a hoop that people who don't have a disability have to jump through. So if registration forms, and they don't, if registration forms for the Parks and Rec Department said, hey, if you want a reasonable modification, you have to call the director, that's going to deter some people from asking for the support. So being aware of that helps. Program access, I touched on this a little bit. This is especially important at some of the destination parks you have, like Gage Park and Lake Shawnee Park, where you have so much there. It's not a requirement that you make every single asset at every single park accessible. So again, using the one of three approach, dispersing the accessible assets throughout the county is the way to go. And we know this works. We've had cities and counties that are working under Department of Justice settlement agreements. We've had Parks and Recreation agencies under Department of Interior agreements. We've been in federal district court for our clients, and this approach has been accepted. So we know it's an effective approach, and we've incorporated it in our recommendations for the department. So why audit facilities and parks? I mean, the obvious reason is you're required to, but the most important reason is it's the right thing to do. You know, I know that the department wants people with and without disabilities to have equitable access to the programs and the parks and the facilities that you operate. I think this is a fair point to talk about the age of some sites, though. You know, certainly some sites that were built pre-1990, access just wasn't a feature in the minds of the designers. So we continually see older sites, and again, the program access test can apply here and offer some relief. So our process is pretty simple. We don't have digital eyeballs. We measure everything that we see at a site. We use an app that is customized with our own checklists, And as we're collecting the data, it sends the data to the cloud, and the cloud starts writing the reports. I don't know what the cloud is, but the reports work great, and it's a very fast and efficient way for us to do this. We use pretty simple tools when we're in the field. A tape measure, a 2-foot digital level, not a 4-foot level. If an enforcement agency ever comes out, they're going to have a 2-foot level. So we evaluated your sites with that same tool. We also have a door pressure gauge that accurately tells us how many pounds of force it requires to open doors at your facilities. And then lastly, we do use checklists within our system. NASA uses checklists. Brain surgeons use checklists. So our work is clearly not rocket science or brain surgery, but checklists always help. So what is the transition plan? Again, it's a way to make the programs accessible. It is a plan that allows you to disperse your access retrofits. It's a plan that allows you to address your unique sites as well as your recurring assets. And it's stretched out for our recommendations to you to around 12 years. The Department of Justice is not really clear on how long you can stretch this out. The longest we have ever stretched a transition plan, and this included public right-of-way for a relatively large city, was 24 years. So you're probably in about the right spot for Parks and Recreation Department. Couple of jurisdictions have said, hey, we want to use these as factors in setting the retrofit priority. One is the severity of the barrier. So if there's a building and there's no ramp to it, that's a severe barrier, I can't get to it. The stairs would have to go. But the flip side of that is low-hanging fruit. What are the things that are easy to do that you can do with current human and fiscal resources? In the transition plan that we gave staff, you can sort it, it's an Excel spreadsheet. So you can sort it by zero cost to highest cost. And there were about 900 things that could be done with current human and fiscal resources. We've seen a lot of communities say we want our highest use sites made a higher priority. We've also seen a lot of communities say we would rather invest our fiscal resources for the retrofits in public spaces, not necessarily in employee spaces. Certainly acknowledging that if an employee does acquire a disability, they're going to be treated the way they're required to under Title I. So a couple things that we saw at sites, and before I jump into this, I'll tell you that in our mind, access is a function of three things. The first is design. The second is how it's installed or constructed. And then the third is maintenance. You have total control over maintenance. Arguably, you've got control over how it's constructed. But you'll see a couple of elements in the pictures here. So the first in the left, parking is a pretty hard requirement to meet. The slope can't exceed 2.08% in any direction. So that's at 2.4%. We typically pass parking if it's at 2.2. There's not a lot of construction tolerance in parking. So we noted that one here. Accessible parking striping is faded. The space is in disrepair. So faded paint is a pretty relatively simple fix. We saw a handful of accessible route issues, and this is, again, pretty common in a Parks and Recreation environment. I just got an email this morning from a Parks and Recreation department asking about using pavers at their sites. And pavers are great, they're attractive, but to a great extent, this is what can happen. So you've got to be careful if you're going to have bricks or pavers and make sure that they're maintained so that they're accessible. In the right, the landing slope of the curb ramp exceeds 2.08%. It's at 5.4%. So when I come down a ramp or when I go up a ramp, there's supposed to be a level spot there that's 2.08%. So that's a pretty Pretty significant variance. Picture on the left, this is really, and both of these really illustrate what happened in 2010 when park assets became a part of the standards. In the days before, you wouldn't have thought anything about putting a picnic table in a park or courts in a park and having people walk over grass or dirt to get to them. But grass or dirt are never an accessible surface. So in a park, there should always be a minimum of 5% of picnic tables that are reached by an accessible route. It can be poured or planked or decomposed granite. There are a number of surface choices that you have. In play areas, we saw a handful of issues. Again, this is pretty common. Is this design, is this installation, or is it maintenance? So in some, we saw a surface that was not in good repair. In some, we saw the transfer platform that was too high, but was it installed wrong? Or has the surface been kicked out? So to a great extent, when we look at a site, we're not there to try to figure out who deserves the blame for this. We're just there to tell you that that's too high as a transfer platform. We rarely see the perfect restroom. Here, grab bars are located outside of the compliant range. Grab bars are, the specification for grab bars is based on human anthropometrics. 95% of us have an arm reach of this far. 95% of us can reach this far while we're seated on the toilet for the toilet paper. So it's all about the science of how far a human can reach. So if these are installed improperly, that's going to be a problem. Picture on the right, the sink rim is too high. So that's an important piece too. Once I've used your accessible restroom, I should be able to get to the sink rim, which can't be higher than 34 inches. At Great Overland, restroom doors have some clearance issues, the picture on the left. Then you have some objects in overhead clearance. If I'm a person who's blind, I'm using my cane to help detect as I'm walking through the site. So the sweet spot here is between 27 inches and 80 inches. There can't be something that protrudes more than 4 inches there without a warning that I can detect with my cane. Again, here in the left, the accessible route is not free of gaps. Gaps can't be greater than a ½ inch, and the changes in level were fairly significant at more than a ½ inch. Loose rugs, oddly enough, a common thing. Those cause not only a trip hazard, but also an access hazard. So I mentioned the community feedback that we had. We had some good sessions on March 30th and 31st. The people who came out really liked what they got from the Parks and Recreation Department. They, of course, had suggestions for more or other or different things. But it was generally a very positive couple of meetings. And that helped us put together the final transition plan. So for you in phase 1, which is things that are either low-hanging fruit or were recently constructed and we think were done wrong, you're at about $5 million. In phase 2, new things to the standards, parks, sports fields, you're at about 1.8. And in phase 3, things that are not yet subject to a final standard, you're at a little over $1 million, $1.1 million. We also do include department option. So these are deficits at a site, but we think you don't need to correct them because that site at another nearby park is accessible. And then we also do list smart practices. That was about $4 million worth of work. So the total is a little over $15.5 million. It's pretty common for us to see departments take the transition plan and stretch it out and have it meet the capital improvement plan and other budget resources that become available, and we fully expect that that's what will happen with Shawnee County Parks and Recreation too. But I'll stop there and answer questions if I can.
Questions?
If I can, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
On page, I'm not sure what page, but number 39, it starts to identify some of the parks that would need to become accessible. And the first one that jumps out to me is number 2 on that list, which is Country Club Park. Country Club Park is a park that we just recently put items into. So is the equipment that we, and I'm not sure if this predated us adding the equipment to the park, and I'm just trying to line up when you did your assessment versus when we installed new equipment at the park, so that I have that for my frame of reference.
Yeah, we hadn't gotten this report when we had done that work, but I read that part, and so right away I realized that when he talked about having fields or things out, courts out in the middle of the park where people have to walk through the grass to get to, I think that's our issue there, if I remember correctly, that we don't have a sidewalk that leads from the street or from the parking area
Okay.
to the amenities that we installed.
So that may then be, and I'm assuming that there's a report that will go into more depth as to what you were looking at for each of these specific
Yes,
parks.
for each of the sites that we saw, there's a really comprehensive site report that has digital images embedded in it. It lists the citation and the federal standard. It talks about what the requirement should be, what we saw, and then what we recommend.
When you talked about the rule of 1 of 3, when we also then take that into account with unique buildings, the Great Overland Station. The Great Overland Station registered as a historic building. I mean, where does that register with the ADA?
Well, obviously, unique sites we don't apply the 1 of 3 to those. So historic sites, they're not exempt, but what you can do is when you have the site report, before you're going to do any work, you take it to the Kansas State Historic Preservation Officer. And he or she or that office says, no, the work here would not threaten or destroy the historic significance, or they say, yes, it would threaten or destroy it. And if they say yes, then you do not have to do it.
Okay. Then Shawnee North Community Park. The building that's at the Shawnee North Park is a old building going back to the turn of the century, 1900s. And do we say we have community centers that are accessible, so this community center does not need to be accessible under the rule of 3?
It becomes a dispersion question then. If there is no community center that serves that community or that part of the county, then we might lean towards saying make it compliant.
Well, if I was to look at the Garfield Community Center, which would be the next closest community center from Shawnee North, at what, I mean, is there a distance or a gap?
There isn't, Commissioner. The Department of Justice has been really vague about this. So the good news is you get to decide. The bad news is you get to decide. And there needs to be some rationale as to why you leave Community Center A as is and inaccessible and rely on Garfield.
Okay. Now, I'm just trying to, as we apply these recommendations to our parks, being able to get down into the weeds, so to speak.
Sure.
Okay. I noticed that some of the parks came up repeatedly. Betty Phillips Park comes up in several different places. Is there a reason why, I mean, is it just kind of focusing in on a park to say this is one that we can highlight to bring up to speed, or?
You're in the final report, right?
Yes.
Usually when we have a site that is mentioned more than a handful of times, it's because we thought the retrofits there would be easier to make, or again, because of dispersion, it was an important site to make compliant.
Okay. The last thing that I had, and it relates to the disc golf. If I was to do disc golf, that requires me traversing a lot across a large grassy area. And you've said that dirt and grass are not handicap accessible.
Correct.
So how would I outside of paving an entire field, which would kind of diminish the game of disc golf, how do I play disc golf as a ADA compliance?
It's a absent provision in the standards. So what we usually say is get me to the first hole. And then from there, I can ride a golf cart through your park. I can ride a Segway through your park. And then it becomes a part of the issue is what are the goals made out of? Is there a way that I can get the goal to come down to me if I'm using a mobility device so that I can retrieve my disc? But this is exactly the same issue in real golf. The flight of a golf ball is unpredictable. So there's never going to be a requirement that the entire golf course be paved, and the same for disc golf. It's not practical.
The last question I had is, we've identified things that maybe should be addressed or could be addressed in a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 approach. You've talked about an implementation plan that can be phased in over a period of time. Your recommendation for Shawnee County as to how long they should be phasing this in?
I would say 12 years.
Okay.
And if you're working under a settlement agreement, you have 3 years, maybe 4 years. Like I said earlier, the longest we've ever given, and this was for a large city that included all of their public right-of-way, was 24 years. So I would do everything possible to aim for 12. This is just a plan though too. Master plans change, CIPs change. There's nothing wrong with you accelerating a project. There's nothing wrong with you bumping a project. As long as you continue, Commissioner, to act in good faith and make budget expenditures on an annual basis and actually make retrofits occur at sites.
I'm curious as to Commissioner Rippon's take on this as a park planner.
It's interesting. I remember when the ADA first came out, and we were kind of under the assumption if we had one park that was accessible, that was good. And I remember we doing Hughes Park, and that was good. That was, I think, the first accessible park in the state of Kansas, and we thought we were good to go. And then realizing later on, oh no, we need to apply this to all new projects. So, and two, that we slowly started phasing things in. Then the rules changed a little bit. Well, they're always constantly changing, I think. But I remember restrooms and rec centers and just going through the whole gambit of things. Interested, just overall with playgrounds, did you find most of them fairly accessible, or were they deficient, or?
Playgrounds are a complex environment because of the interface with safety. So we very rarely find a playground that is fully compliant. There's either an issue with the surface or the height of the transfer platform, or to make up for the fact that kids who use a wheelchair, 95% of them can't use the transfer system. So to make up for that fact, the more elevated play components you have at a playground, you're required to have more ground level components so that that kid can go there and still play with his friends. So we'll see that too. We'll see too few ground level play components.
Overall, the rec centers, you feel like they were in pretty good?
Some were, some weren't. Some of the older infrastructure, and you're probably familiar with it,
Yeah.
has some warts that need to be addressed. There are still a couple of guidelines pending. You mentioned that this changed in 2010 with the addition of parks and playground assets. Beaches, campsites, trails, picnic areas, which is so simple to make accessible. Viewing areas. That's final as a guideline, but it's not final and enforceable as a standard. So eventually that'll come out and that'll give the department clear guidance on what an accessible trail looks like, for example. But today, we listed that in our report as a smart practice.
Speaking of trails, we have trails that are, we have concrete trails, we have some are limestone screen, some are just single track trails. How does the ADA look at single track trails? Is that,
When you say single track,
I mean just wood chips, I mean just going through the,
if it's wood chip and it's compacted into the ground, and if it's well maintained, it can pass.
what about slopes on something like that?
You don't get an extra variance. So the slope has got to be 5%. It can go up to 8.33% for, I want to say 200 feet, and then 10% for another 20 feet.
But you can't have, can you have trails in that same area that are,
Yes,
and then can you have steeper trails? that-
exactly. So think about ski areas.
Yeah.
Trails can look like that. There can be the green runs, there can be the blue runs, there can be the double black diamond runs. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And a key part of that then is communication, is having your website say, hey, the average slope at John's Trail is 8%. The average cross slope is 2%. There are no barriers until a mile into the trail. And that way, if I want to go for a trail wheel that morning, I can go to your website, I can see which trails look inviting to me, and I can go to that one instead of going to one and then find out I can't get very far on it.
Tim, it's my understanding that some of the things, as we make improvements, just general improvements over the last few years, we've been adding ADA accessibility pieces to things, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, we try to do that. I mean, when we know and we're informed, we definitely try to do that. I mean, obviously, we mentioned Country Club Park earlier today. That's an instance where we didn't. You know, we put a pad down for the picnic table and did some other things, but never thought about how you're gonna get there from the street. So, pretty major flaw there. But we do try to take that into account, yes, when we're doing new projects.
as we go through this report, are there situations in here where we're gonna look at it and say, well, our choices are
Yeah.
either spend this amount of money or just get rid of the amenity altogether?
Yeah,
mean,
I believe there are, and you know, I think that one of the neat things to come out of this plan is this gives us really another tool to help decide, prioritize projects. He's right, there are a lot of things in this plan that we can accomplish with very little to no money, just with our current staff. So, you know, right there, we're gonna start knocking those things off the list and tracking that. But you're right, when you look at, and we talked about Shawnee North, for example. To get that facility, Shawnee North Community Center, compliant would be very expensive. So we'll have to make some decisions on what we want to do there. Is it best to go in and try to retrofit that facility and make it compliant? Or do we do something else? Do we build something else? Those will be some tough decisions.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you very
Sharon.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Commissioner. I also do want to thank Tim and his staff team. They were great with us. And Chris Curtis was the answer man. If we had a question, he either knew the answer, found the answer, or made it up. So it was a pleasure to work with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job, Chris, thank you. All right, next item, please.
Item 3, consent agenda.
We have 2 items on the consent agenda. I'll make a motion that we approve those.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item 4, new business A, County Clerk number 1, consider all voucher payments.
Okay, under building maintenance, McElroy Inc., $10,465 is for repairs to cooler at coroner's office. Under facility management, paid with ARPA and SLFRF funds, Shawnee and Company Inc. for $182,794.25 is for renovations to 707 Quincy. Under sheriff, paid with ARPA and SLFRF funds, Motorola Solutions Inc., $45,171 is for the replacement of batteries for backup power supplies. Our total vouchers for June 3rd, 2022, $798,285.24. There's no questions or comments. I will move for approval of the vouchers.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Rippon, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item A2, consider correction orders.
I'll move for approval of the correction orders.
Second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Cook. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item B, Department of Corrections number 1, consider approval of request for the reclassification of the vacant health services liaison position and authorization to hire an eligible candidate at an advanced step with an increase of $25,432.80 for salary and benefits to be paid from the detention budget.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brian Cole, Shawnee County Department of Corrections. To give you some history regarding this, the Board of County Commissioners, well, I first want to say I work very closely with Jim Crowell and Betty Greiner and Angela Lewis regarding this position. That basically what we did was that we came before the commission, asked approval for a new position with the caveat that we would not ask for any other funds. We would use our existing budget to create and implement a new position with the health liaison in our investigation intelligence area. One of the things that we've been working very closely with Jim Crowell and the county counselor's office on, and Jim, please step up if you need to at any time, make sure I don't mess this up, is that just because Shawnee County contracts with a private company when it comes to the providing, administering behavioral health and medical health does not leave Shawnee County without risk of liability. That some of the court hearings and some of the education that Jim gave us was that counties still have an obligation to do their due diligence to make sure that we're monitoring the contract, that we're making sure that we're jumping on the grievances, and that we're having somebody assigned and working in those areas to make sure that our contractors are staying on task with things. We do have a contract monitor, but nothing to this level at Shawnee County. And we do have instances where we have issues of lawsuits or liability to come up, and the county counselor's office is asking those specific questions of who's in charge or what's doing those things there. So, to make a long story short, we all felt that this was a much needed position, so it was open. We had not had an applicant for almost a year put in for this. It is a requirement that the person be an RN, but this is not an RN that they're giving the application of like bedside care and things like that. This is an administrative position that we want to have in the facility that has that level of education, that not only can they do the investigations, they can work closely with female investigations, our Prison Rape Elimination Act, working with grievances as well. Well, we finally did get one applicant who came to us from the private sector who has extensive work in corrections as an RN, and came to find out that her current salary, this is something that she really wanted to do, has exceptional qualifications, that we needed to do something to work on the salary and the range. So I immediately met with Angela Lewis and Jim Crowell regarding this. Tim Phelps was involved. We looked at this, not only to come up with the plan, if approved, to be able to look at what was the proper fit for this position when it came to the responsibilities, but also gave this employee the opportunity for growth in the future. So with that came up with was looking at reclassifying this to a range 14, or range 19 from, I believe, 14, or 14 or 15, and starting the candidate on step 13. This gives this person the salary that they are making now. It is important to say that if this does get approved, and, you know, Betty and I talked about this, is that this will be something that, although we're able to absorb in our budget this year, those will be something that we'll have to budget for in the future years. So we do feel the need that this is a very important position to reduce liability and risk, something that we've been working very closely with Angela and Jim on, and I'd be happy to answer the questions you may have.
Any questions?
And Jim, if
Now, this is a needed position within the Department of Corrections, and I'd move for its approval.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made by Commissioner Cook, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0.
thank you so
Brian.
much.
Next item, please.
Item C, Commission, number 1, consider canceling the October 17th Commission meeting.
October 17th, 18th, and 19th is the Shawnee, or the Kansas Association of Counties Conference in Kansas City, or Overland Park, I guess. And so we'll, in theory, we'll all be attending that. So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we cancel that meeting.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. Next item, please.
Item 5, public comment.
Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak today? Okay.
I don't know how this works.
Just state your name and then,
Well, I'm Lyndon Johnson, and then I usually say I wasn't born in Texas. And then I'm lived over half my life in Shawnee County, and I'm a retired drug dealer. I'm a pharmacist. So I'm a legal drug dealer, I say. But anyway, you've all gotten emails from me from time to time. But there's just a couple of things I'd kind of like or just to bring out and get you don't have to comment, I just kind of want it on public record. And then the various departments, rather than me emailing you guys and then forwarding it. Anyway, maybe this is just a way to streamline things. Does that sound good?
sure.
Okay, so we're coming into fireworks season. I think from the past, you guys don't have a whole lot of regulations. I think what you have to approve the stands that are in the county and stuff. But I guess people can have fireworks shows any time of the year if they get the state fire marshal has a permit. Last year, there was one in my neighborhood that was on, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact date, but the 4th of July last year, I believe, was on a Sunday. That they did a fireworks off of Shawnee Heights Road on the 2 Saturdays before the 4th of July. So it wasn't July 3rd, it was the week before. I was totally unprepared. I don't think sales of fireworks were legal in the county yet. I think they started on whatever that Sunday was, like June 28th or 29th. So I didn't expect fireworks, and this fireworks show starts, and I've got pets. And I've talked with other people in the neighborhood, and they're like, they had no idea. So if there's some way that from the fire marshal's office or whatever that you can find out if there's, so they're called permitted fireworks shows. So if you can, and then post that like on a county site or have some, so that people know. And it's not only pets, but it's PTSD, veterans and other people that, maybe have issues with loud noises that you're not expecting and stuff. So that's my firework issue, and whatever, if there's anything the county can do to help with that. Somewhat related to that is the road project that on Southeast Croco that apparently is gonna be going past the 4th of July. So people need to know when they're coming out to the festivities, that when they go to leave Lake Shawnee on the 4th of July, that somewhat, it's not a major deal, but there's gonna be somewhat limited traffic flow to get going up Croco to get on the interstate to come into town. So those two are my fireworks things. Other issues that are kind of in my neighborhood and stuff, I live off of Southeast 45th Street. I use Southeast 29th. That you got, I'm grateful that 29th was widened, but the speed limit I think right now is 40. You know, and if I'm well, I drive 5 over. I think most people do, but you can be driving 5 over and cars are going by you like you're driving on the interstate at 40 and they're driving at 75. You know, I don't think they're driving 75, but they're driving over 50 miles an hour on the north side of Lake Shawnee essentially from the Turnpike Bridge to West Edge and then West Edge on to out to Croco. So that's, I've emailed various times saying, you know, could they set up a speed trailer on there just to even let people know that, you know, you're looking at what, or the sheriff's department is looking. And then that also somewhat applies to 45th. I've talked to several people on the south end of the lake where the improvements were made last year. And some of the neighbors say, well, you know, we have a left turn lane, but if I'm slowing down to turn in my drive-in, you know, I look in my rearview mirror and I've got quarry trucks and everything else bearing down on me. And so there's been some concern about speed limits along Southeast 45th. And I think about a month ago, the sheriff did have a speed trailer between California and West Edge for eastbound traffic. I went by there a couple of times. One day I went by, and I believe that's 40 or 45, and that's what, you know, and the speed trailer said 40 miles an hour. I went by about 48 by my speedometer, and it never changed. So I called the non-emergency sheriff's number and said, well, whoever set up that speed trailer, I don't think it's working. They said they'd look into it. About a week later, I went by there, and it didn't seem to be operating. But anyway, think about speed trailers on 29th as well as 45th. The other issue in regards to 45th is I've noticed a lot more 18-wheelers over the last couple of years. And I think, you know, I realize that there's a lot of warehouse distribution, you know, Target, Home Depot, etc. But my feeling is that there are some 18-wheelers to avoid paying a little bit of turnpike fees. They're using 45th Street to go from South Topeka over to K10, and then they probably go around K10 and go into Overland Park. And that's the way I would go if I was driving a car, but I don't know how appropriate it is to have a whole, it's not a whole lot, but it's noticeable. You know, I probably, if I'm using 45th 3 or 4 times a week, at least half the time I'm seeing 18-wheelers going one way or the other. So last item, and I probably need to, I haven't contacted the weed department people, but I don't know what the status of honeysuckle is, but it, to me, I've fought it on my lawn, and and a lot of it got taken out along 45th Street with the construction 2 or whenever that was, a year ago. But it's in a lot of city right-of-ways along Sycamore between Croco and that, I know that's out here. From Croco to Rice Road, the city right-of-ways have a ton of it, but there's a lot of places where the county right-of-ways, and literally honeysuckle, I don't know what variety it is, the wild stuff, I've got examples, you can cut it off, and if you don't treat it just in one growing season, it'll grow back 4 to 5 feet. So you can imagine established plants, 1 year it's hanging 10 feet, or 1 year it's right on the edge of the right of way. The next year it's 5 feet in the right of way. The next year it's 10 feet in the right of way. So just, those were my 5 things, so.
Okay.
So you have any questions, or it's mainly, I just wanted to kind of on the public record, so.
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Well, I can certainly sympathize with you on the honeysuckle. I've been fighting it in my backyard for
Okay.
a couple of years now. And I know it's not just the weed department, it's Parks and Rec, Public Works, everybody's fighting that stuff right now, so, thank you.
okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak today? Seeing none. Next item, please.
Item 6, administrative communications.
All right, any administrative communications? I know of one at least.
Hello again, Commissioners. Tim Laurent, Parks and Recreation Department. So today is a happy day. It's a sad day for some of us, but I wanted to let everybody know that Mr. Luby back here will be retiring this coming Wednesday. It's his last day with us, his last day on the job anyway. Before I talk anymore, I'll just get the details out. We're going to have a gathering at Reynolds Lodge at Lake Shawnee at 1:30, from 1:30 to 3. I would encourage you all to come out. And then if the need arises, we'll wander over to Thunderbirds and let the festivities continue. So I'm looking forward to that. Personally, I've only been here a little over 3 years, and there's a handful of people that I've really counted on to learn the ropes and figure out how things operate here at Shawnee County, and Randy has absolutely been at the top of that list. So he's been a great help to me. I'm happy for you, Randy, but I'm going to miss you. I am. I enjoy our interactions at work. He's a great resource. I count him as a friend, and so I am going to miss him. Having said that, I'm happy for you, And when you're out golfing every other day out at Lake Shawnee, I hope you send me a text, I mean, I won't go till 5 o'clock, I promise, but I'd like to get invited every now and again. 37 years with the county. I don't think we could have asked for a better representative. Somebody, he's very well thought of throughout the state, through KRPA. I think he was a Distinguished Professional Award winner not too long ago. I would imagine there's a pretty good chance he'll be a KRPA Hall of Famer if I have anything to do with it. So anyway, with that, I'll quit mumbling on, and Randy, if you'd like to come up and say a few words.
Thank you, Tim. Those are kind comments. And Bill, I'm not going down your route of retiring and take on more duties than what you did. I do want to take the time, though, to thank you three and past commissioners for all your support for Parks and Recreation and myself. You've been good to my family, and speaking of that, I have my wife Shelley here, my daughter Madison, and her boyfriend Cole. Aubrey couldn't make it, something to do with a lot of kids and different things going on this time of year. But I consider it an honor. I've worked with Parks and Recreation under all 4 of the directors in the history of Parks and Rec, starting with our ex-commissioner Ted Inslee, and I can't thank him enough. He's been a mentor, a father, anything you'd want out of a man. Ann Freeze was great to work with, John Knight, and now Tim Laurent. And Tim has picked up the morale of our department so well, and I know we're going in the right direction, and I look forward to seeing all the things Tim and his team will do in the future. With that, I just want to say thank you again, and I appreciate everything you've always done for me and the family. One thing I did want to touch on, thanking the family, it's, and Bill would contest to this, that it's not easy to be a family of a Parks and Rec professional. We give up a lot of holidays, weekends. You know, when the public gets to play, we have to work, and I just want to tell them thanks for that. So, thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Randy, before you go, the public wants to know, how many lights does TARC put out during Winter Wonderland?
Well, I was quoted in 1997 of saying that it was, or 98 it was, we had over 1 million lights. Past director, though, said, have you ever thought about how many 1 million lights are? And I started counting, and no, we don't have 1 million. But there are a lot.
Well, I think retirement will have you come out and count.
Now, I might do that.
Thank you, Randy.
Uh-huh.
Randy, thank you for all your, I've known Randy for probably 30-some years, and, but, you know, you always have those people, you have their telephone number that you call when something goes wrong, you need to know something, and he was one of the guys on my speed dial to call when something happened, because
Only when something went wrong, though, is what you're saying.
we don't have time for phone calls when things go right. No, but he was always good to respond and get things done. He knew what was going on, and I certainly appreciate that. And I know I'd like to thank your family too, because I know what that's like. On weekends, you're working.
Mm-hmm.
So, but thank you for all your years of service.
Well, thank you.
Well, Randy, thank you. There's not too many people have had as great of an impact on Shawnee County as you, especially in the Parks and Rec Department. Although you may not know the number of lights at Winter Wonderland, I'm sure you know the number of holes at Lake Shawnee Golf Course.
Yeah.
So enjoy that time, and hopefully you can continue to help with our golf tournaments that we have, because I know that you've been a pretty integral part of that. So
Yes, I will
appreciate it.
continue to help with that. And I did want to tell John that he said something about never knowing where a golf ball goes. You've been watching us or what? But anyway, thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you, Randy. Should we do a photo? Should we do a photo?
Randy, would you
You
like
want to
a
do a
photo?
photo? Yeah. Let's just get everybody.
Yeah, they're giving us the check this time. Aubrey's gonna miss out.
Anybody else? You want All right.
I moved over a little bit.
Ready on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, appreciate it. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you.
Okay. Other administrative communications.
Well, that's going to be hard to follow right there. John Landon, Director of the Weed Department. Commissioners, I just wanted to let you and the public know that we did receive a shipment of 2,4-D in, so we have chemical in stock, and stop by and visit us at 2044 Southwest Western and pick up what you need. So,
All right.
Thank you.
I'm sure people will be excited to hear that. Anyone else? Seeing none. Commissioner Rippon?
Well, I attended the Mulvane Art Fair this weekend. It was well attended. We had good weather one day, and it was good to get out and see all the local artists, and it was just a good event. I also helped put out some brick for the War Memorial, and it's one of the fun things I get to do, and I get to meet the veterans and hear their old stories, and I love it. So.
That's great.
Good weekend.
Commissioner Cook?
Noto had the Caw Valley Bank Community Block Party on Friday that was very well attended, and then Saturday and Sunday was the German Fest over in Oakland, and so it was also very well attended. And so it's good to see all the community coming together.
Yeah, I've heard that. I don't have anything to add, so next item, please.
Item 7, executive session.
We do have a need for executive session today, so I will move that we go into executive session for a period not to exceed 20 minutes for the following reasons. 10 minutes of which will be for consultation with an attorney for the public body or agency, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship, regarding a pending contract for the renovation of the courthouse. And another 10 minutes would be for consultation with an attorney for the public body or agency, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship regarding pending litigation in federal court. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Commissioner Mays, seconded by Commissioner Rippon. Those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes 3-0. We are in executive session. Let's just start it right now. We're back from executive session. No action was taken. We are adjourned.
Okay, I've got two things to sign.